Hi, how's it going? I'm Mike from Australia, and this is the English Breakthrough for Germans podcast. This podcast will give you, German speaker, comfortable listening practice with some anecdotes from my own life and teaching, and help you better understand how successful language learning works so you can forget learning apps and take control of the learning process yourself. As an adult learner, I reached C2 in German, and I've now been teaching languages for 15 years, both English and German to adults. Mir fallen die Worte nicht ein. Das sagen viele meiner Kursteilnehmer. Wenn du das auch manchmal zu deinem Englisch sagst, dann bist du hier genau richtig. I'm convinced that there is no such thing as people who are more talented at languages. We are all experts in language. We've shown this because we've successfully learned our first language. People who learn second languages more successfully have just been lucky because they have discovered the right kinds of learning strategies. And you will learn these strategies here on this podcast. I also believe that no teacher can actually teach you a language. Languages involve muscle movement, like sport, dance, or playing a musical instrument. No soccer coach, dance, or music teacher can learn for you. You need to move your muscles and train your speaking muscles yourself. You can find a transcript of this podcast episode on my Patreon page, and a link to that is in the episode description of the podcast. Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. It's great to have you here. So I'll start off by letting you know that I'm very happy that I have my bike back. That's right, after only 2 days in the workshop, I got a message saying that my bike was ready and it was available to be picked up. So it turned out that the internal gears in the back wheel needed to be replaced, which meant that the whole wheel needed to be replaced as well. So it wasn't an easy job, but now I have a new back wheel, new internal gears, and a new gear cable, and also a new gear shifter on the right side of the handlebars. So my bike feels like new. I'm really happy, even though it did cost €290 to get fixed. But at least now I can get to the squash courts again easily, which is my current passion and obsession. Okay, so in this episode, I'm going to continue talking about the theme of vocabulary. All right, and I'll talk about something that I've very, very rarely heard other people online talking about. But it is really an absolutely essential thing to consider if you want to be a successful language learner. I know that a lot of teachers know about this, but it's often not something that learners really have a sharp eye for, and it's really, really critical to look out for certain things. You really need to do this in a lot of cases. So some people are able to work it out on their own, some people with the help of a teacher, but a lot of learners don't actually ever realize what I'm going to talk about in this podcast. So listen carefully and you'll get a lot of tips and assistance. So if you've really understood this concept, you're going to be a much more effective language learner, and it'll start becoming more fun for you too. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you straight away what the topic is. I'm going to introduce it to you through German. I'll give you some German examples, okay? I'm going to tell you some of the things that some students have said to me in German class recently. So remember that I teach German as well as English. And these are people who have moved to Germany and are learning German with me. Okay, so I'd like you to think about what is wrong with these sentences, or how could the sentences be improved? All right, so with one student, we were talking about a wedding that the student went to in another country. It was outside Germany. Okay, I said, how many guests were there at the wedding? And my student said, ich bin nicht so gut in Rechnen. Es gab ungefähr 100 Leute. Okay, and then we talked about the activities and things that at the wedding, and she started to tell me about the cake. She was impressed by the cake there and thinks that cakes in Germany tend to be less sweet than cakes she's familiar with. And she misses that. So the student said, in Deutschland gibt es keinen echten Kuchen. Okay, so that's example number 2. I've got 3 examples and I'll read them to you again in a moment. In another lesson, I was talking about podcasts with my student, and my student said to me, Ich kämpfe mit Podcasts. Okay, so we have these three examples. Ich bin nicht so gut in Rechnen. Es gab ungefähr 100 Leute. Example 2. In Deutschland gibt es keinen echten Kuchen. Example 3. Ich kämpfe mit Podcasts. Okay, so what do you think is the problem here? All of these sentences use perfect grammar. There are no issues with grammar. But what the problem is, it's a problem of vocabulary, and it's difficult to say exactly what the problem is, but I can tell you what the problem is. The problem is collocation. Okay? Collocation might be a new word for you, so I'll tell you what it means and what it means for us as learners. So collocation is a word that linguists use. The German word is Kollokation, by the way, so you probably also haven't heard it in German before. So linguists and teachers use this word, and it's a word which means that words typically come with other words. Yeah? So we have word combinations or word partnerships or words which frequently go together. Okay? So in German, when you're saying goodbye to someone, you say schönen Tag noch. But you don't say tollen Tag noch. So in this case, schön collocates with Tag, right? In fact, if you change schön to gut and you say guten Tag, the phrase has a completely different pragmatic meaning, right? Isn't that interesting? Schönen Tag is goodbye, guten Tag is hello. Okay, so these are strong collocations. Strong collocations means that you don't have many options for these words if you want to use them together. So if you want to speak fluent German and not confuse the cashier every time you go to the supermarket, to Edeka, you have to say schönen Tag noch, not guten Tag noch, right? So these are strong collocations. You cannot change this. All right, let's take another word like verletzt in German. What words collocate with verletzt? What words can you use with verletzt? You can use schwer or leicht. Can I say hart verletzt? This is something that a learner might try to say. No, you can't say hart verletzt because verletzt doesn't collocate with hart. So it's not a collocation of verletzt. So we really have very limited options. So these ones are called strong collocations. Okay, and some words which collocate with English, in English with the word injured, which is the equivalent of verletzt, of course. You can say things like seriously injured, badly injured, critically injured, slightly injured, etc. Okay, so we have strong collocations. That's when you only have limited options to use with a word. And then we have weak collocations. And this is not really a problem for you so much. But an example for weak collocations would be like with the word house. So there are lots and lots of different adjectives that you can use to describe a house, like a big house, a small house, old, new, modern, traditional. But still, it would be strange if you said an environmental house. The listener would probably be confused and think maybe that you instead wanted to say something like an environmentally friendly house or an environmentally friendly building. Okay, so collocations can also be the preposition that the verb uses. So an English speaker who wants to say something like, I waited for the bus, might in German say, ich habe für den Bus gewartet. But of course, für is the wrong preposition. It should be auf. So it should be, ich habe auf den Bus gewartet. So why is it wrong? Like für den Bus, that's how it is in English. So why can't we say that in German? So the reason is that auf is the auf is the correct collocation, and für is the wrong collocation. There's not really any other semantic reason why that's the correct answer. It's just that that's the preposition that's used with that verb. Anything else sounds strange to proficient speakers of that language, even though something else might technically be possible or grammatically correct. So one time, actually, I've got a little anecdote for you about me when I made a similar mistake. So I used to play in a band. It was like a soul band. I played guitar, and once we were rehearsing together in the rehearsal room in Berlin, and we were speaking German. So we played a song, and then we stopped because there was some kind of confusion about the structure of the song. I realized that it was my fault. I got confused and I played the wrong thing. I said to the band, "Oh, Entschuldigung, das lag auf mir." The drummer and one of the singers started laughing at me and they said, "Oh, das lag auf dir." But what's the difference between an and auf? In this case, it's like auf would be on top of me, I suppose. But then they were nice enough to correct my German and tell me that it would be correct to say, "Es lag an mir." Okay? All right, so let's come back to the sentences from my students. The first one was, "Ich bin nicht so gut in Rechnen." Es gab ungefähr 100 Leute. So the student was trying to say that she's not so sure that her guess is accurate. Okay? So normally in German, a speaker would say something like, "Ich kann sowas nicht gut einschätzen." And this would sound more natural to other German speakers. And for something like, "Es gab ungefähr 100 Leute," although this is really 100% effective communication, there is a better alternative for this, and that would be to use the word Gäste or Hochzeitsgäste. So it would sound more natural if you said something like, "Ich kann es nicht so gut einschätzen, aber ich glaube, es waren ungefähr 100 Gäste." Okay, there we go. So you can see it can be a little bit more efficient if you use the right kind of vocabulary. Okay, let's look at the next thing that she said. She said, "In Deutschland gibt es keinen echten Kuchen." Okay, so in English, the perfect word here is proper. So she was trying to say something like, there's no proper cake in Germany. So it doesn't fit her idea of cake. You can do this in English if you want to say something playfully, like, "Oh, look at that large dog. Now that's a proper dog." So you're saying, "I like that kind of dog," right? Or you might say something like, "I don't want to be freelancing anymore. I want a proper job." So what you're saying is that you don't really playfully consider that kind of thing to meet a standard that you have. You don't think that small dogs meet your standard, or you think that only when you have a full-time job does it meet your standard. So that's a proper job or a proper dog. But in the case of echt, like gibt es keinen echten Kuchen, here we're talking about fakeness or authenticity, which is a bit strange in this context. So you might use this word echt to talk about a painting that looks like something from a real artist, but it isn't. So for example, "Ja, das ist kein echtes Picasso-Gemälde." So here, echt does collocate with Kuchen, I guess. Not really. It's not a very, very good word. But it's definitely the wrong choice for saying that the cake doesn't meet your standard. Right? So the student should have said something like, "In Deutschland gibt's keinen richtigen Kuchen." So you may or may not agree with her, but that's what she wanted to say. So she was trying to translate from the English word proper. So when we consider collocations, and we can see now that collocations can take on a new meaning from what the original meaning might mean as well. So think about the word heavy in English. Heavy means schwer, right, in German? But what about a heavy smoker? You can't say ein schwerer Raucher. That has a different meaning in German, right? Okay, now the last thing. So one of my students said, "Ich kämpfe mit Podcasts." So here it was a translation from English with, "I struggle with podcasts." In German, a better alternative would be something like, "Es fällt mir schwer, Podcasts zu hören." So it seems that the vocabulary "es fällt mir schwer" is not yet in the active vocabulary of this student. So she hasn't learned the meaning of this fixed phrase yet. Okay, so what can we do as learners about all of this? I'm going to read you a short quote from a book for English teachers who are learning about the topic of collocation. Okay, this book is called Teaching Collocation by Michael Lewis. So remember, collocations are words which go together, go with other words. So things like word combinations, groups of words, or groups of words which have a shared meaning together. Okay, so in the book it says, "Without grammar, little can be conveyed. Without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed." Conveyed means communicated. The single most important task facing language learners is acquiring a sufficiently large vocabulary. We now recognize that much of our vocabulary consists of pre-made chunks of different kinds. So the single most important kind of chunk is collocation, so words which go together. So we can see from this quote that really knowing a word also involves knowing its grammar and the patterns of words that it is regularly used with. So if you know the word smoker, you need the word heavy smoker as well if you want to be able to use that word fluently. So language is full of examples of two or more word collocations, or words which go together, which express something specific in precisely the form in which they typically occur. So if we change the items, if we change the form in any way, it means that they lose their communicative power. Yeah? So these collocations or language chunks are a large set of items, and they can help you express often complex ideas very, very simply and precisely. If you don't use collocations or language chunks, the more you have to use longer expressions. So you need to use more grammaticalization to communicate something which a native speaker would express with a precise phrase and little grammar, not very much grammar. Yeah, so we saw this with the idea of ich bin nicht so gut in Rechnen. So if you're interested in some other collocations, here are some errors that that German speakers might make in English, okay? So today I'm in home office. In English, we would normally say I'm working from home. A home office in English is actually ein Arbeitszimmer. So if you say today I'm in home office, it means ich bin heute im Arbeitszimmer. Surely it's also correct information, but it's not what you were trying to say. So another one that I frequently hear from German speakers is I can't take part in the meeting, for example. So an English speaker would normally say I can't come to the meeting or I can't go to the meeting, and take part is not a collocation of meeting. You can say attend a meeting. So if you want to say take part in a meeting, change it to I can't attend the meeting today. Okay, classic German speaker mistakes would also be things like to overuse the word make. So things like I made a holiday in Spain, or we made a picnic in the park. So make doesn't collocate with holiday or picnic, so we would prefer sentences like I went on a holiday to Spain, or I had a holiday in Spain, or we had a picnic in the park. Of course, as we talked about, you can speak quite high-level English or German if your grammar is excellent, but it makes it much easier for our listeners if we prioritize vocabulary, which fluent speakers are used to hearing more often. So it's much better to say, es fällt mir schwer, Podcasts zu hören, than ich kämpfe mit Podcasts. Because there's less effort which the native speaker listener has to use to understand the meaning of the speaker, what the speaker is trying to say. Also, ich kämpfe mit Podcasts is not really clear in its meaning. So you might have to wait for the speaker to say something else before you really understand exactly what they mean. And this, of course, takes time and slows down communication. So this reminded me of something that a guitar teacher said to me when I was about 16 years old. I used to take guitar lessons once a week for half an hour after school. I played a lot of guitar in school. In fact, I played a lot more guitar than I did homework. Anyway, that's not the point. So one day I was with my guitar teacher in a lesson, and we were talking about improvisation on the guitar. He said something to me which is very, very similar to this kind of idea about language. So here we are talking about guitar improvisation, but of course he could have easily been talking about language too. So this is what he said. When people are improvising, they're never really truly creating something completely new on the spot. What they're doing is recycling things that they've learned and heard before and combining things that they have practiced in new ways. Okay, so when we use language, we're doing the same thing. We have tens of thousands of pre-made chunks of language, groups of words, which we can use in speech, and this makes communication faster and more efficient. And it frees our minds to focus on what we really want to say, instead of just constructing sentences with our grammar knowledge, word for word. So here are some examples of pre-made phrases in both German and in English. The English phrases are more or less equivalent, but you can see if you can tell how different they are. So notice the difference in vocabulary here. So in German, I'll say it in German and you can tell me just have a moment to think about what you think it could be in English. Ich stehe auf Rockmusik. I'm really into rock music. Mehr oder weniger. More or less. Die meisten Leute. Die meisten Leute sind wirklich freundlich. So in English, most people are really friendly. Not the most people. Okay. Mein Nachbar spielt die ganze Zeit laute Musik. My neighbor plays loud music all the time. Okay? So die ganze Zeit, all the time in this case. Es war die Art und Weise, wie das gesagt hat. It was the way he said it. Leidet unter Depression. He suffers from depression. Kurz gesagt, in a nutshell, also eine Nuss, Nussschale in eine Nussschale. Okay, ein starker coffee, a strong coffee. And this last one as well, I'll tell you, this is one that a lot of German speakers get incorrectly. So the German is, ich habe ein eigenes Auto, which in English would be, I've got my own car, or I have my own car. So not an own car. Okay, so if you change these, so let's think about this one. Mehr oder weniger, or more or less. Could you imagine if you changed it to weniger oder mehr? It wouldn't sound right anymore. Or if somebody said, es war die Weise und Art, wie das gesagt hat. Suddenly also this doesn't sound right anymore. So this is what we mean. We really can't change these because they do sound a little bit strange to native speakers. So as a learner, it's really important that you begin to look out for these kinds of collocations or chunks of vocabulary in English. It also means that although you might think you know or be really comfortable with a word, you might not know all of the collocations which it could be used with. So if we take a word like suitcase, you might know that suitcase means Koffer in German, but let's see how well you know some of the other words that suitcase can be used with. So here are some verbs. You can pack a suitcase, unpack a suitcase, weigh a suitcase, check in a suitcase, collect a suitcase, buy or sell or need a suitcase as well. Yeah, adjectives might be large, heavy, small, damaged, lost, or unlocked, and things like that. Yeah. So this is all knowledge that you have around the word suitcase. So just knowing that the word suitcase means Koffer in German is not enough. So there's a lot of other vocabulary which is associated with the word that is well beyond just its German translation. Okay, I know this podcast episode is getting a little bit long, but there's one more thing I'd like to do with you. I'm going to read you a short text about the Sydney Opera House. You can imagine that this is being told by a tour guide or something on your first day in Sydney in Australia. See if you can identify which words or parts in the short text consist of pre-made chunks or word combinations. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Sydney Opera House. As you probably know, it's one of the most famous buildings in Australia. It's located right in the heart of Sydney and attracts people from all over the world. One of the most interesting things about the Opera House is its unique design. At first, many people didn't like it but over time it became a symbol of Australia. If you ever get the chance, I would definitely recommend going to a concert at the Sydney Opera House. All in all, it is well worth a visit. Okay, so some of the language chunks here, or the pre-made chunks that are quite common, might be something like, I'd like to tell you a little bit about. As you probably know, one of the most it is located right in the heart of people from all over the world. One of the most interesting things about at first, over time, if you ever get the chance, I would definitely recommend. All in all, and well worth a visit. All right, so a lot of these different things here, you can see that a lot of them are chunks that we hear again and again and again. So it's important to keep an eye out for this. Okay, I'm going to come to the end of the podcast. Here is some of the key advice for you. Number 1, native speakers speak fast and more efficiently because they use thousands of pre-made language chunks and phrases. You probably already know hundreds or 1,000 of chunks in English. So even if it sounds a lot. When we use these pre-made chunks, it reduces the cognitive load. Number 3, often learning single words is not suitable because words typically go with other words. So when you learn the word smoker, you also need to know its collocations, like a heavy smoker or a chain smoker. Next point, we have to look out for word combinations which are common in a particular language. Using word combinations in our first language, like make a picnic, can be problematic. Okay, the next point, not using common word chunks or word combinations might mean that you have to use extra grammar and longer sentences to communicate an idea that you could otherwise communicate very easily with the right words or just a few words. And the last point, learning collocations is fun and it gives you more control and confidence when you're speaking in a new language. Okay, that's it for today. As always, I'm going to put the transcript of this episode on my Patreon page if you'd like to read along, and you can access that for free. A link to that is in the podcast description. If you have any questions, you can ask me there. Otherwise, take care, and I look forward to having you again on the podcast, listening to the podcast next week, hopefully. All right, bye.